This is the deep dive into page 3 of the Oklahoma 2025 residential purchase contract. So when we left off on the bottom of page 2, the buyers were setting up inspections. The top of page 3 goes over all of the different things that the buyers have the opportunity to inspect. There's 12 different items listed, and then 13 is where a buyer can write in something, if there's something else that's important to them that they want to have inspected as well. I will say I've never had anybody come up with something that wasn't covered under the first 12, but I suppose it's possible. So if there is something else that they want to inspect, just make sure that they have it written in there so there's no pushback from the seller on that. Treatment of termites and other wood destroying insects. Any cost related to that should be limited to the residential structures, garages, and then other structures as designated in paragraph 13. So if there's evidence of termites somewhere that you think may need additional treatment, you can add that in. So this is the part that probably causes more confusion than any other part of the contract. So I'm going to spend a little bit of extra time here. But once the inspections are complete, the buyer has a couple of different options that they can do to move forward. First and foremost, before they do anything else, the buyer shall deliver to the seller a copy of all written reports obtained by the buyer. So what that means is if they have a written termite inspection, like a roof report, the whole home inspection, anything like that, anything that they have in writing, by signing the contract, they agree to turn it over to the seller. That's not up for negotiation. They signed the contract. That's part of what they're agreeing to. And so it says the buyer shall deliver to the seller. That's it. So any written reports that the buyer receives through the investigations process, they are obligated to give those to the seller. What this does not include, however, is the appraisal. The appraisal is not considered a written report obtained by the buyer. It's actually a written report obtained by the lender. The only time we give the appraisal to the seller or listing agent is if the appraisal's short. Then we need to verify with them that the appraisal is short and give them the valuation page. Or if there's any appraisal requirements that need to be met, the listing agent and the seller have the opportunity or the right to see what those requirements are and to get them remedied. So that's the only time that the appraisal is given to the listing agent. Other than that, all written reports through the investigation process that the buyer receives, the buyer is obligated to give those to the seller. So that's first. Then the buyer shall select one of the two following options. So once they give the written reports to the seller, they have either option A or option B. Option A is, in the sole opinion of the buyer, the results of the inspections are not satisfactory and the buyer can cancel the contract with written notice and get their earnest money back. So that's option one. So if they decide that after the inspections, this house just isn't going to work for them for whatever reason, it is solely up to their discretion. They can cancel the contract and get their earnest money back. This is where it's really important that we don't say too much. So it's whatever is important to the buyer, but that's the buyer's decision. And what the only thing we can say is based on the results of the investigations and inspections, the buyers decided not to go through with the contract. That's it. No further explanation necessary. So that's one of those times where it's really important that we don't talk. But if the buyer decides, yes, we do like the house and we do want to move forward, however, the house needs a new roof, then the buyer can send a TRR to the seller and say, we will move forward as long as you are willing to replace the roof, or as long as you are willing to treat for termites, or whatever the case may be. Now, the caution with the TRR to the seller is that's also the seller's last opportunity to cancel the contract. So if we send a TRR to the seller and say, we want these 5 things fixed, and the seller says no, then the seller can put the house back on the market and move on. That's their last opportunity to kick the buyer out of the contract. If And it's also when the buyer submits the TRR, that's their last opportunity to cancel the contract. So when they submit the TRR, the buyer is saying, if these things are completed, we have every intention of moving forward with the contract. Now, if the seller says we will fix items 1, 2, and 3, but not 4, 5, and 6, then the buyer can back out again at that point if we can't come to an agreement within the negotiation time period. But when the buyer submits the TRR, the buyer's waiving their right to cancel, and it's the ball is in the seller's court basically at that point. So hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, this is the part of the contract that we have the most questions over. It comes up over and over and over. So the things to remember are buyer is obligated to give all written reports to the seller. The buyer can then cancel the contract solely at their discretion. We don't elaborate on that at all. Or they can request that repairs be made, and then it's negotiable between the buyer and seller. But if they submit that repair request, they're waiving their right to cancel unless the seller doesn't agree. So then other expirations of the buyer's right to cancel, if they don't get inspections done within the inspection time period, if they don't deliver the TRR or a cancellation within the time period, if they don't verify they can get hazard insurance, if they don't find out that the house is really bigger or smaller than they thought, those things, if they don't do those things within the investigations period, they've waived their right to cancel the contract and they are obligated legally to move forward. So that is it for page 3. Again, initials at the bottom, and then we will be right back with page 4.